Well, good evening. I'm going to continue from in Revelation chapter 12, and I want to back up a little bit to start off with because I didn't cover some of these things yesterday. I was talking about the same chapter and verse 8. Excuse me. You can see on the screen there I've got, it's from my book, Revelation 12:1, and then I rewrote it with its context. Putting in some of the key words with the Greek, and which I've gone over a lot of this before, but I didn't cover everything exactly the same as I did in the book because I generally don't use what I wrote, and that's silly in some ways, but in other ways it opens me up to see new things or see areas where I can correct. When I say see new things, I'm not talking about new information. I'm talking about potentially more accurate translation and interpretation, given the information that we've already received in the book of Revelation and the Gospels of Jesus, and then of course everything that Tiendo and crew said and did in their 25 years incarnate. Well, incarnate for different amounts of time for different individuals. But what I wanted to get to in this case was talking about the moon, especially since we're coming upon a total eclipse. So the moon's being talked about a lot now, which I put in here a little subnote, but I said that it's from the Greek 4582 in the Strong's Concordance, Selene, from Silas, and or it also has to do with brilliancy. And that's also the fact that the brilliancy comes from also the word glory is related to brilliant light. And so the sun is the lesser of the two lights that were put in the sky for us, talked about in Genesis. And the moon is the attractor. I'm not exactly sure how to interpret that in that way, but I think it's providing well, I could be wrong, but I think it's well, I don't know. I'll have to go back to that because I'm not sure if what I'm going to say makes any sense or not to Tiendo. And I'm asking them as I hesitate to help me say what they would say, which I don't have any way of knowing unless they actually said it already, because they don't give any of us new words now. But they can help us understand what's already been given. And that is documented here in the when you look at it in the Greek. Anyway, so instead of hemming and hawing like I'm doing, I want to move on to where the moon is talked about as reference to being female, mothering, giving birth to, generator, deity that relates to Daniel's prophecy of the two in the end times. And if you notice before in Revelation chapter 12, there was the other reference to, not the only reference to Daniel's prophecy, and that I'm talking about that a little further down in here, and we can go to it, where it talks about the two individuals coming in the end times. And those are the two witnesses, and one of them is depicted as the woman in Revelation 12:1, and the other one is depicted by the one that she births, because the woman is the father. And in John chapter 14, verse 22 and 23, talks about how Jesus is going to manifest himself, and that his father was going to come with him to make his abode with him. They're going to reside with us. Actually, residing is the way to translate the terminology used in the Jesus Gospel record. So that's not the only indications. They also said that he would Jesus would come again with a new name, which it also talks about in Revelations 3:12, and that he would also give us the name of his God. And his God is his older member, as T and Do used the term older member, but is also termed the Father, the Father in heaven by Jesus. And that was the Greek word pater, or in the Greek it was Abba. So, which was relating the father to a parent, and a seed-giving parent, because the male is the deliverer of the seed that fertilizes the seed that is an egg, that fertilizes the deposit, if you want to look at it that way. And a deposit is a soul that is actually like a chip. It's got certain programs. In other words, it's got certain format and structure to it. It's actually physical, although it's not something that we can see. But it can actually, it's actually bigger than the body, according to Do, if I understood him correctly. As it accumulates more and more next level mind, next level information, next level behavior and ways as provided by the older members, especially when the older members are incarnate, that's when we need to pay the most attention to what they say, that will be consistent with what Jesus said, but will be an update to what Jesus brought, because there needs to be a continuous update for the student body, who are also souls that are taking over human vehicles. That's what resurrection meant in one of the contexts of the resurrection, had to do with taking the human body and taking it and making it obedient to that soul through the direction that is absolutely required of the midwives, who are going to take that soul through their birth canal to be born again of flesh, which is the water birth that Jesus talked about, and in order to be born by spirit. And spirit is mind, synonymous, according to T and Do. And there's only two kinds of mind. There's the Luciferian misinformation mind, and then there's the true mind, which is from the kingdom of God, that every member of the kingdom of God, the level above human, draws into their soul pocket, their soul pillowcase, as though called a soul, and a pocket, and that actually changes the actual body, or changes that soul into a new body that becomes an individual, which Jesus demonstrated during the Transfiguration. That's when he completed his metamorphosis, the chrysalis stage. That's when he became a Christ, which wasn't necessarily the first time he became a Christ, because when he was serving as Elijah, he also overcame the world and was taken. Just like Jesus said, that if you came from the next level, then the only ones that were taken back into the next level were those that came from the next level. And that was Enoch, who started as Adam, but Adam wasn't taken. But he came back, and 7 generations later, generations were more time in those days, incarnate as Enoch, and he overcame that vehicle, took over the vehicle, and was taken by the next level into the kingdom, taken onto a spacecraft that was not seen at that time, was not reported as seen at that time. And then Moses, who was also taken on a spacecraft after he completed his task, and Tiendo said that his body was also taken, even though there's a dispute about that, and that dispute was started by the Luciferians, as it says in Jude about the body of Moses. I think it's Jude, I might have that wrong, but the body of Moses was disputed by Lucifer. Anyway, so, and since Lucifer's a deceiver, a liar, and a sly one at that, you know, like a fox, and we know that if he was disputing with the next level regarding the body of Moses, that he lost that dispute, and the next level took the body if they wanted to take the body of Moses. And maybe perhaps that's why when Elijah left, and then when Jesus came, that's why Moses and Elijah were there at the Transfiguration, because perhaps they actually brought those two individuals. Even though it was the same soul, those vehicles could have been brought back to show those disciples that. Not that that was necessarily that important, because, but that's the way I can kind of put it all together in a way that is contextual and accurate. As accurate as I can imagine, or draw from Doe's mind, because he didn't talk about a lot of this. In fact, I try to say the things that Doe and T and Doe said about it, and if I didn't say it, they said something about it, then either I don't know it, I don't remember it, or they didn't say it. Or I don't understand it the way they said it. Another possibility. Maybe there's other possibilities how I can not get it right, but I think, you know, it's none of this is actually important to connecting with T and Doe. The biggest importance, the most important part of that is actually talking to them directly right now, or any time when someone in your privacy, whoever's listening to this and feels to do it. It's certainly not something that anybody must do. It's all optional. It's all because if you're not in the classroom, and the classroom doesn't exist right now, then then there's more options. And when you're in the classroom and you've committed to being in the classroom, then there's many things are not optional, except that you can leave the classroom. It's an option to stay in the classroom. There were no bars on the windows, and there were no locks on the doors that would prevent anyone from leaving. And people did leave in the middle of the night many times. T and O really didn't like that because, well, I think for the most part, not because they wanted to talk them out of it. They didn't want to talk anybody out of into staying. That didn't happen. In fact, when somebody came to them and said they wanted to leave, it was a matter of how fast they could leave, and it was sometimes the next day, like in my case and a number of others' cases. It was the next day or two or three at the most, I think, before someone actually left, when they finally decided that they wanted to leave. Sometimes it took a number of days for someone to decide they wanted to leave. But many times early on, individuals left in the middle of the night, like I said. And the reason why T and O didn't like that, as far as I understand, was because they knew they would be prone to talking to people about who they were with and where they were in particular. And that was more important to T and O because they knew that there was a potential that family members of the vehicles that had joined the group or were looking for those family members or loved ones, and were even hiring investigators to do that. And that was actually proven to us when we had a visit, and Junodi found out that her brother, who was a police officer, had hired an investigator to find her. And she told us that when she got back from the visit that we had two visits in 1985 and 1987. I think it was. I think they were 2 years apart, approximately. Before T left and after T left, we had the visits. And actually, on the second visit, I actually went to Junodi's vehicle's house where her mother was. And there might have been some other family members there, but I didn't meet them. And I went there with Sarah Fody, who I traveled with on that second visit. I didn't travel with anybody on my first visit. But on my second visit, I traveled with Sarah Fody because her family was down the road from where I was. But also T and Do wanted the family members to meet some of the other members of the group to see that they weren't, what they were made out to be, crazy and as if we were being held against our will or being brainwashed. Of course, we were being brainwashed, but we had to brainwash ourselves. T and Do were just giving us the ammunition and the tools to do that. But they didn't have any way of actually of monitoring whether we were actually washing our own brain, washing it from the humanness and the human mind and filling it with next level mind, except if we told them about things that we were doing. Like if we were having slippages and which we were supposed to tell them when we broke procedures and fell away from our adhering to our the oaths we took, the vows we took to be celibate of mind and body and to not be deceitful, like the major offense list and the minor offenses that were that are listed in the Heaven's Gate book, also found on the Heaven's Gate website, where you can download the whole book for free. If you just go to that link that says it's talking about the book, how and when the physical kingdom level above human, how and when Heaven's Gate, physical kingdom level above human, may be entered, is the name of it, I believe. I should finally have that in my memory, right? But my brain doesn't work that well sometimes. But right, so then how can we trust that what I'm saying is right? Well, go to the book and study these scriptures and look at the Greek and read my book where it talks about the things that I experienced with Tiendo that I do remember pretty well. But listen to the tapes too, because you'll see a lot of the things I talk about in the tapes. And So I wanted to move on, though, past this part to the moon, where it's talking about in my book, talking about it was called the Pistis Sophia. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. The Pistis Sophia is today the title of a record dated to the 4th century of Jesus, communicating to 12 male disciples and 7 female disciples. I thought that was particularly interesting, that total was also 19, and if you double that, it becomes 38, and that's how many students there were. Okay, now I'm not going to talk about that right now more because I haven't really tried to study that any further, but there is some indication of that doubling. For instance, where we have the 12 disciples, and we have the 12 male disciples here, of course, and they represent 12 pillars in the New Jerusalem. So they're very important to there's 12 special individuals that are among the whole body of students. And the whole body of students could be as many as 144,000 that are in different stages of approaching graduation, but that there were 24 elders. So, and they were the ones that were talked about after that, who laid down their lives, who threw down their crowns. It says in Revelation chapter 4, I think. They threw down their crowns, and they also fell down before the throne. I think in Revelation chapter 7, maybe that's mentioned. But you can look up all this terminology, and it was also talked about in Revelation 11, that they lay down their lives or fall down. And that's, the same thing. When, Jesus talked about it as laying down their lives. And so the same terminology of fall down, fall on their face, was the same thing. Where falling on the face was the human vehicle was the face that was the body that you had taken over. You had incarnated into. That's what incarnation means. It's taking over a human body that was provided for you, and it was provided for you by giving it a soul deposit. And I don't have any doubt that there's a number of individuals out there right now with vehicles that were given soul deposits. I believe that's the case, because otherwise they wouldn't believe in any of this about Tiendo. They wouldn't be attracted to it at all if they didn't have some kind of a draw given to them by the next level. And that's generally given at birth, but I don't know that, I think Doe indicated that it didn't have to be necessarily at birth. So there's no telling how many souls were given. and there could be different kinds of souls given, first-time souls and for second-time souls. In other words, for souls that are coming back, because Jesus had 70 disciples that he sent out. And that number 70 started actually in the Old Testament in the Moses encampment, when Jehovah gave instructions to Moses to appoint 70 elders to be like a group that would be given some authority, because there were a lot of people in that group. There were like 600,000 men, as the way it was reported. And so if that was just the men, were there that many women? Maybe that many women. And how many children were there? There could have been, that many children as well. So there was, potentially over 1 million people, or at the least, they were counting people as, men meant human beings. And so there were potentially 600,000 human beings there. But I don't think it meant human beings. So I think that was a huge group. And so Moses, through Jehovah's teachings or instructions, put into effect a lot of structures. And one of them was a structure of 70. And then he had the structure of the Leviticans that were serving in the priestly role, taking care of the tabernacle and the temple area, and then there was a smaller group that were actually more pertaining to exactly what Moses needed, which was Aaron and Miriam. And Aaron was actually appointed by Jehovah a task to do, just like John the Baptist was appointed by the Father, Jehovah, the same person, to do a task with Jesus, for Jesus, to prepare the way, as it says in the Scripture. That was John the Baptist. Was probably serving in the vehicle named Aaron. Well, I don't know that for a fact, though, but it could be a different individual, because the next level apprentices individuals for the same tasks that are being done. So John the Baptist was being prepared to do a task like Jesus had, and Aaron was being prepared to do a task like Moses had, and it might have been the same individuals. So anyway, so that's why I was thinking, like, you've got the 24 elders in the end times talked about, and there were 24 individuals in those classroom after T left her vehicle. There were 24 individuals that were in the classroom before they went public again. And I don't know if I was one of them, because I think when I did the count at that time, I think there were 25 or 26 maybe. But then again, there were the 4 living beings also that are separate from the 24 elders. So that brings the number into 28. And I think they're related to, like, individuals that are being prepared to be archangels, like Michael and Gabriel. And I forgot the names of the other 2. But, so all of this is like organized in a structure because the next level is very organized. When I tell people more about the classroom, they say, well, it sounds like the military. And I say, yes, it is like the military, except there were no weapons, and there was no teaching people to kill anybody. And there was no human behavior off time. I mean, in a sense, there was human behavior off time when they sent us to the movies, but when you're in the classroom, there is no human behavior because everything you're given by T and Do makes it a task for T and Do. So even though we're doing human things, like watching a movie, not that the next level couldn't have members, well, the members of the next level use technology too. So, so they could be watching something on a screen, I don't know that it would be something that was acting in particular, but they worked with the movies. So maybe they do watch the movies that they stimulated. For instance, The Sound of Music was a movie that was stimulated by T and Do, using that story. That was a real story, but they used it and made it into a musical related to the song, which is in Revelation chapter 14. Talked about how they would be learning, the students would be learning a new song, and that song is Do, Re, Mi, Fa, Sol, La, Ti, Do, where T is actually stimulating the birth of Do. In other words, T is the top of the octave. She's the oldest member in the octave. The oldest note in that octave, the most advanced note in that octave, the highest note in that octave. And she's giving birth to the next generation octave, which starts as Do. And that's what this Revelation 12 is talking about by her giving birth. So it's all related to the prophecy on purpose, because the next level wanted to provide all this information, like through movies, like the movie Brother Sun, Sister Moon was another one that was about St. Francis of Assisi, and how Clare, St. Clare, was like inspirational for the individual that became known as St. Francis. And she was very few words, and T was very few words, because the task was Do's task to do the talking, most of the talking, because he was the one that was going to be becoming a father. That's why it was said that he was going to be born to the throne in Revelation 12, because the throne is where T and Do are from, but T is the older member of the throne. So if Do is not there, T is the throne. But if they're working together on a task like they were as the two witnesses, then they're both the throne. But Do had to be born to that position. And born means, it's the same thing as Jesus said that you have to be born of flesh and to be born of spirit. It doesn't mean that it's not the same kind of birth. Of course, that's, you're not coming through a womb, except the womb is representative of the human vehicle that you're in. And that's what the moon represents, being the mother, and represents Mother Earth in that sense. The law of attraction, which I wanted to say something about that, and I should have researched it more. But in the document that T wrote, which is the only official document that T wrote, although she wrote some of the things in the little booklet that was called Preparing for Service, that each student had, that had meditations in it, and little affirmations, and little little song in it, the song that went to the tune Jesus meine Freud, which is Freund, Jesus meine Freund, which is German for Jesus my friend, and that's a Beethoven composition, and it went like this. And the words that they gave us for it were not the words that were in the German Beethoven composition. They gave us new words to it, and those words were, I'm going to try to sing it, I'm not that good at it, but, and I don't think we ever sang this together, but we sang it by ourselves. We may have sang it together once. But it goes like this, because prayer was we never had public prayer. And prayer is another subject altogether, but if we did want to talk to the next level, aside from the fact that the next level was present with us, so we did all our talking and asking of questions to them. But before that, before they told us to go through them entirely, which they didn't tell us till maybe 1977, when T said that we needed to give them our will, and T later told Do that Do told us later that she thought she would lose half the class from saying that. And she might have lost half the class from saying that, because we were about 70-something then, and it got down to 24. So anyway, but the song went, help, help, help me have no human ways, no thoughts of self, no faults to see, only the ways of space. Now I know my heart is fast in my Father's path at last. Only the ways of space. Only the ways of space. That's it. That was the song. So that's the new song that we were taught. But the song really means, in addition to that, that's part of the song. But T and Do talked about how the song, T always talked about how learning the lessons, even before they gave us that little song, learning the lessons, she compared it to the song Old MacDonald's Farm. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and in his farm he had a cow, E-I-E-I-O, with a moo-moo here, moo-moo there, here moo, there moo, everywhere moo-moo. Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O. Then, the moo-moo was the first lesson in the song, okay? So maybe that's following instructions, okay? So that we wouldn't do like Adam did and Eve did and break instructions. A very primary lesson that was really harped upon a lot in the Moses camp. That's why they were given so many instructions. But we also received instructions too, and we had to follow instructions. They were called procedures, but we also called them instructions. We had a separate, instructions became procedures also. But anyway, so then the next stanza of that song was, Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on that farm he had a lamb, E-I-E-I-O, with a ba-ba here and a ba-ba there, here a ba, there a ba, everywhere a ba-ba. Old MacDonald, everywhere a ba-ba, and a cat moo-moo here and a moo-moo there, here a moo, there a moo, everywhere a moo-moo. So in other words, you learn the second lesson, which let's say the second lesson was not allowing images or thoughts of sexuality in our brain. So let's say that's the second lesson. As a baba. So, but you didn't drop the following instruction lesson to learn that first lesson. To learn the second lesson. you continued to learn both lessons now. That's why you repeated the moo moo here and the moo moo there. And so you did that through the whole song, so that by the end of the song, all the lessons were continuously being repeated and demonstrated and learned and gotten better at. Because Tiendo talked about how this was building the muscle, the mind muscle, which they associated with the solar plexus of the part of the body, I believe, and as being the muscle part of it. They taught us early on to try to tune into the A tone, 440 hertz. They gave us an A tone to listen to. We would strike it against something, the tuning fork, and put the tip of it to our head and hear it that way, or to our temple and hear it that way, or to any part of the body and listen to it. Just put the tuning fork to our ear, the fork part right next to our ear to hear that tone, and to get that tone in our heads, because they wanted us to tune into that tone. Not that we ever, I don't remember ever doing any chanting to that tone. And we didn't do anything as a group related to that tone. It was all individual. It was when Tiendo first came out public, they were talking about, they were representing human individual metamorphosis. Of course, then it became distorted into a religion, and so everything was done in groups then. And so now Christians think that they're all saved because they accepted Jesus as their Savior, which, 2,000 years ago, when you accepted Jesus as your Savior, got you saved, got your spirit saved, or your soul saved for a new opportunity to be brought back. But depending on what you learned from that was going to determine what was going to happen when in the third trimester, when you're brought back. That's what I was saying. There's stages to the growth, and everybody is included. Nobody is excluded. The only ones that are excluded are, according to Revelation 12, the dragon and his angels, the Luciferian fallen angels, and all those that have given their total allegiance to them. In the discarnate world, they could all be considered part of those angels. Maybe. I don't know if they would be considered angels or not. But Tiendo talked about how we were conquering our influences, and that influences that all humans were influenced by discarnate humans. And in fact, that Tiendo said that the human body is actually like a computer system, and that the ways into that computer system, through our ears, through the senses, are all like different forms of input devices, like a keyboard and a mouse and a joystick and all the different ways that you can have input into that computer system. And so the discarnates play on all those sensors to get us to do the things that we want, that they want. Whether that's to listen to music, or to play a flute, or to become a computer programmer, or to become the president of the United States, or become a scientist, or become a preacher, whatever it is. We are not any of those things. What we are Well, Tiendo said that all we are in these vehicles is the decider of what to let in and what to get rid of. That's the magnet. That's like the sun and the moon, or the earth and the moon, like the poles of the magnet. One pushes and one pulls. And likes don't attract. I know the spiritual people are the people that, talk about likes attract, but they don't in a magnet. Likes repel each other because the object is to overcome and to just draw from the next level mind. That's the draw part of it, and of the magnet, and to put out is the service that we give to the next level by giving that mind to other people, by being the instrument of passing that mind on to other people. So when we tell somebody that Tiendo said this, then we're giving some of Tiendo's mind to somebody else, and they can accept it or reject it. But if they accept it, then they're drawing from Tiendo's mind through you. You're being the instrument of that. Because when you accept their mind, you believe it, and then you repeat it, when you accept it, you're receiving it into your soul, and it becomes part of your soul. Doesn't mean that's not tested. Doesn't mean that you still won't have doubts about anything. You can have doubts about anything and everything, okay? But keeping on going, even with those doubts, and rejecting those doubts, which might come right away, if you're very strong and you can just tell that doubt to get the heck out. Like, let's say a doubt comes to you that says that Tiendo are just humans. They just, maybe they meant well, maybe they were, interesting humans or unusual humans, but they're not anything special, anything above human. Let's say you have that thought. Okay, well, you can just, if you have enough mind in you from them, you'll probably hear that thought and say, I don't know, I've already seen a lot of stuff, that they've said, and it makes a lot of sense to me. And I was warned about that voice, that voice is going to come. And that's actually, it's my benefit that that voice is there, because I'll be able to build my own strengths of mind to be able to get rid of that voice so that I don't even hear you anymore. And that will happen to where you don't even hear that voice anymore. And if somebody tries to tell you that in person, or the voice in your head tries to tell you that you know that it's a lie. But then there'll be other things that Tiendo said, or Do said, or members of the group said that was in the Heaven's Gate book, that you'll say, I don't know if I believe that. Now, there's nothing wrong with having that thought, because we're not judged by, we don't grow, and we're not judged by the thoughts we have. We're judged and we grow by the thoughts we get rid of. In other words, when we don't accept those thoughts, the faster we don't accept those thoughts, the stronger we grow. To the point to where we can even recognize those thoughts before they actually become thoughts. And the only reason I can say that as a fact is because I've experienced it. Even though if you get overconfident with that, you might find that you're put to the test to where thoughts that you thought you were able to get rid of easily before they even registered in your head, are now you're having a problem with. And that's because I think the next level decided to send you an influence that was a little stronger to test you so that you could build even more strength. Because that strength that you're building in your soul is actually changing that soul, growing that soul into a new being, a new creature that is like the butterfly from the caterpillar. And it's gonna, and that new creature, then when it's time to be fully born, will be taken out of that vehicle, however that happens, maybe at the death of the vehicle, or taken on a spacecraft with the vehicle. I don't know if that, if that could ever happen. Tian-Do certainly thought it was a potential to happen with their crew. I don't think it's something that would happen with this crew now. The individuals that are attracted to Tian-Do now, there's no indications from Tian-Do that that's going to happen with any of the vehicles now, including myself, that the vehicle would be taken. Because the next level doesn't really have a use for these vehicles. I mean, they could have a use for the vehicles, but that's why they, when they left, even in 1997, they prepared a little travel bag with a change of clothes in it, I believe, and they had their passports and they had a little money, which also had other relationships. Why they did that, partially like in the fulfillment of prophecy, and which I'm not going to, well, maybe not the fulfillment of prophecy so much. I haven't really documented that, I don't think. But certainly with the Mark Twain, $5.75 to go on, to board a comet, to ride the tail of a comet to heaven, okay? That's pretty darn interesting that Mark Twain, in 1914, I think it was, or 15 or 16 or 17, said that when he made the movie Captain Stormfield's Trip to Heaven, which was filmed, and there's a little clip of it that I was able to find some time ago. I lost it now, but it's on my old computer system, but that Edison made. But that's not the only reference to things that Samuel Clemens said through Mark Twain. I talked about it in the last broadcast a little bit, and I've talked about it in previous broadcasts, and I talked about it in my book a whole bunch. Anyway, so I'm sure I left a bunch of loose ends there, but that's really the gist of where we are right now in terms of getting rid of the human influences. And the more behaviors and ways that we make our own, that were demonstrated to us by Tian-Do, the more we're growing our mind. And the more we will also feel compelled to share that with others when they are asking, when we see the evidence that they're asking. Now, Tian-Do thought that Christians were asking by being Christians and saying they're Christians. They're saying that they believe in Jesus. So that's, if they believe in Jesus, then they want to know what Jesus taught. And since Jesus taught that he was coming back, and since Tian-Do were the Father and Jesus, then they should want to know that that this is the return that they're looking for. They're saying that they're looking for that return. So we're obliged to be of service to the next level and give them what they're asking for. even though most of them are going to be shocked by it. But there might be 100,000, maybe 140,000, 144,000 that will know that it's true. And that the way that they're going to know that it's true is by the efforts of those souls that know it's true now. That's the service. And with every time the next level sends their older members to do a task with student body, those students are given service. Because the next level doesn't need anybody to just hang around. They want individuals that are going to work for them. That's what worship, Doe said worship meant work for. If you're worshiping the next level, you're working for the next level. You're working for the older members. You're working for Jesus. Like the 70 were sent out, like the 12 were sent out to work for Jesus. Like the and what is the work? The work is sharing what they gave. Not sharing what we have in our minds about what they gave. But what they gave relates to everything that happened in the past, in the Moses camp and in the Jesus camp, even more so. Because the Moses camp was for toddlers. The Jesus camp was for individuals that were about to graduate the 12 grades in school that Tian-Do initially talked about as being the human kingdom structure for the to graduate the human kingdom. There were 12 grades in school. And so Jesus was talking, he was giving the graduation requirements, the initial ones. That's why he said that when he came back, those that were considered worthy would not be marrying and giving in marriage anymore, because they would be like the angels. And that's why he said adultery was even lusting after somebody else when you're committed to somebody else. So if you're committed to Do right now, but you're lusting for a human, then you're committing adultery. But you know, the punishment isn't death, except if you keep on doing it, it'll basically take you down to where you won't have that commitment at all to Do anymore. And that will result in being given more opportunities to learn that lesson. Like the Luciferians were given many opportunities to learn that lesson, but eventually to the point to where you don't have any of that mind in you anymore. Or if it's so little that it's not even a voice that you can hear in your head. And you don't even think of the next level as being above you at that point. You think of them as just being another group of space race, another space alien group that just happens to have better technology. And that, you know, or any of the other ways of thinking that can remove you from showing any relationship or bond to the older member. So even though somebody had a commitment to their older member, like myself, it doesn't mean that they always have that commitment. They don't. They can lose it. They can gain it again. And it's in degrees that they have it in the first place. And they can lose it again, lose some of it again, and they can gain some of it back again. They can gain a little more, lose a little more, gain even more. So back and forth they can go like that, because that commitment kind of doesn't have to vary. They can make that commitment and keep on growing it. I mean, they're going to have lessons. Okay, but that lesson isn't going to challenge the commitment. The lesson will make it so that they look to the older member and say, how can I learn this lesson? Help me do anything it takes to learn this lesson. Even if I have to get rid of my testicles. You know what I'm saying? Jesus said that was, for the kingdom of heaven, that was okay. That was that there were eunuchs that were born eunuchs, and there were eunuchs that were made eunuchs by men, castrated, and that there were eunuchs that made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Not somebody else doing it to you, except, I mean, if your doctor does it, that you're doing it, you're just using him to make sure it's done right, which I believe would be the recommended way to do that. And I'm not saying that that's a requirement. I'm saying that Jesus set that up, and though at the later point of that, but even to the younger students who joined in 1994, he gave that option, and some of the younger students and the older students who weren't necessarily younger minds and older minds, because I don't have a way to know that, although it's likely that the ones that were there from the beginning and stayed to the end were older minds, the 24 elders. But it doesn't mean that that's the case in all cases. So, I don't know. But whatever, it's just that option was given to them, and it was an option. And they actually had to, after sororities was done, which I was a witness to, and I was supposed to be also done at that time, which was going to be performed by Livodi, who was trained to do that by a doctor she worked for as a nurse. But anyway, but after that, a minor complication that happened because of that, though then required individuals some years later to leave the classroom, not leave it like as a commitment, not leaving the commitment, but leaving the classroom to live someplace else, not that close to the classroom. Like I think Alex already went to Boulder, Colorado, and stayed with somebody there, I think, or near there for a time, maybe Riccoti or Jen Rody, or I'm not sure exactly, but I think went with another student to have the procedure done, and he had to get a job and then pay for the procedure with his money that he earned from that job, and that's what Doe required of students, so that it was totally their free will, and there was no obvious influence from Doe. Of course, the psychologists and everything would say that they were already so brainwashed by Doe that, you know, that wasn't their free will anymore. But that's not the way it worked in the next level. It was to stay in the classroom was not easy, because you had to keep up with them. And that's why Doe at one point offered $2,000 each to individuals that were only in the classroom because it becomes so comfortable to live in that classroom. Because that classroom was very comfortable. T used to call it, well, she said that the world was the real world, she said. When she was talking to the students in her classroom, she said that in the real world, this happens and this happens. You have to pay your bills. You have fights with your family members, and you have disagreements, you have problems, you know, with your career and you know, employment, and with health, and and you have to figure out ways to solve those problems on your own. That's the real world. The classroom was like a cocoon, or the chrysalis stage of a whole bunch of cocoons. And it was like it was a commune, but you were taken out of the world. So you were from that world, but you were no longer in it because you weren't participating in those things that were done in the world that defined that human kingdom. You weren't participating in human kingdom behaviors anymore, even though a certain amount of those human kingdom behaviors you participated in order to keep your vehicle healthy. You had to consume some fuel, but what fuel you consumed was regulated by Tiendo. So that became an issue to overcome, likes and dislikes that you had when you were in the world, when you had your choice of what to consume. Now you didn't have your choice what to consume. So just losing that choice was a big test for some people. And the same thing with, going to a movie or something. You didn't have the choice to go to a movie whenever you wanted to in Tiendo's classroom. Tiendo were not against pleasure, but they had to be the ones to deliver the pleasure, because then we'd be using their mind to have fun with that pleasure, whether it was a movie or playing bingo, which we did once, or going to the zoo, or going to a theater production of My Fair Lady. We did that one time, and then going to a church, which we did maybe 1 or 2 times during those 19 years I was with them. I think on Christmas Eve maybe we went to a church one time, and we just sat there and we didn't say anything to anybody. And Doe expressed that he felt the reverence of the next level in the church, even though, even when we were watching satellite ministries when we had satellite dishes, even when we were living outdoors in the 90s, and we had satellite dishes that we made like platforms for them. They were big dishes, like 8 feet across, metal, very heavy. So we took them all apart when we traveled, and then we set them up again. And we made, Logodi and I, actually Logodi was given the task as a primary to design a base for the satellite. We had 2 satellite dishes that were that big. And I was his partner at that time, so I was his Czech partner for designing that base. He did all the design, and he just showed it to me and said, "What do you think about this?" And I didn't know what to think about it, but I thought it sounded good. So I went with him, and we bought all the things for it, and I was a Czech partner. That was frequently the way we did things. We had primaries and secondaries on tasks. And, if something occurred to me when he asked me what I thought about something, then I would say it to him. And, but I can't remember really anything occurring to me. But just the fact that being a secondary was a task in itself. Because it was an assigned task, so it didn't matter what you did. It mattered what you did. Like you wouldn't, if you said something like to Lagodi, like, "Oh, that's not going to work," you wouldn't be using Tiendo's mind to say that. Because that's not the way we were taught to communicate with our Czech partners. We would say something like, "I could be wrong, but I'm not sure that doing that in that way would accomplish what the task requires. In other words, not being, to talk absolutely about things was not a next level way. And I know in my book and at times in these broadcasts, I do say things that are absolute, and sometimes my interpretations have an absolute nature to them. And I try to correct myself when I say that, but it's not just about using the language. Okay, if your intention is that you're trying to figure out things, and it's not so much of it's like sometimes we would say as a check partner, you would say, well, I wonder about doing it this way instead. What do you think? See, that's the same thing. You're making a suggestion, but you're asking what the other person thinks. So now they don't have to then say, no, you're wrong. They can say, well, that's interesting, but if we do it that way, then it's going to cost another $100. And I wonder if T and Do would want us to stay within the budget. So maybe we should check with T and Do on that. And then, but also, if we do it that way, it might not be so easy to take apart when we travel. So maybe it's better to, and then the check partner would say, oh yes, I hadn't thought of that. That's a good thought. Yeah, so that's right. And then they would proceed. They wouldn't need to check with T and Do on anything because they resolved it. But if they continued to have something that they weren't able to resolve, then it would be the job for the primary to write a note to Do and use their check partner to check that note, to make sure that they're not misrepresenting what the check partner was thinking, and send that note to T and Do. Or if it was a real important task that T and Do wanted direct communications on, then we would have the instruction that it was okay to call them on the phone or on intercom if it was at a time when they were in the craft with us living, and we had an intercom system to communicate with them. Or call back to the craft and talk to other check partners about it if we didn't have access to T and Do at the time, because sometimes they were traveling by themselves. So we had all different ways of going through channels, but it was all like within this structure that was allowing for the fulfillment of the service to T and Do. And so if individuals are like talking to Christians, the Christians are going to say, no, the Revelation 12:1 woman is the church. Well, now individuals can say, if they didn't figure this out ahead of time, they can say, well, how could it be the church when this woman is giving birth to a son, and that son is being described as a male child? So is the male child, who are they that they're giving birth to? Well, I don't doubt that the Luciferians can come up with something in response to that. They don't have to, though, because many Christians that are actually doing the teaching of this don't actually have a mind open to the truth unless we can. I mean, they might then wonder and say, oh well, maybe the woman is something else. That might cause them that. But then if you say to them, no, the woman is T, that's another big leap. But if we don't give them that at some point, then what's the use? There's a time and place for it, and maybe that's not the place for it, whenever that happens. because, it's kind of like a strategy, like Tiendo gave us when we first were sent out to talk to Christians. That's what I was getting at before, that we were sent out to talk to Christians because Christians, and what Tiendo described as we were doing, they said we were testing them, is what they said. It was testing. But it was also our lesson and our service. And now the service was the lesson also on how to do it. And what our instruction was to ask for our needs. What we needed was food, gas, so that we could go to the next town, and we didn't tell them that we were testing them. See, that would be unfair to go to a Christian and say, can you help us with food? We're working for the kingdom. We would say we're working for the kingdom of God. We'd use their terminology because it's the accurate terminology to their mind. It's not as accurate as the evolutionary level above human, but see, that's programming that they were given, and that's been distorted now. So to try to give them the updated language and information and perspective, but not use their terminology, is like not giving them a chance to take that little leap up to seeing the truth in what you're saying. So, but I mean, there's other ways to do it. Like notice in the Heaven's Gate book, they didn't use the word evolution in the title, even though initially the kingdom of God, kingdom of heaven, was the evolutionary level above human. That's where Tila came from, the evolutionary level above human. So to go to a Christian and say, well, I'm working for the evolutionary level above human, can you help me with a little food? It's not really, it's not putting them to the test in a fair way, I don't believe. And now if you said, which was actually the same kingdom that the creator came from, or the chief of chiefs being the creator. See, I'm just getting all tied up here now, trying to describe ways of communicating with Christians, which I can't really do a very good job with because I don't do it myself that well. I've learned that to just come out with Tiendo's terminology and talking about Tiendo right away with Christians is making it very hard for them to accept. So I do talk their language, but I don't expect anybody to take what I say as a good example. But there's a reason why Tiendo put in the back of the book all those Jesus scriptures. And did hope that individuals would get to know more about them and than was even in the book, because they said that after the book was already published about what would be made available to people. Thinking about the audio tapes in particular, I believe Doe was talking about when he said that in particular, which they did make available, the ones with T on it, for sure. So, which is plenty. But I don't know, I got way off the track of the Pistis. I think I made my points anyway. I hope there was some value to that. Hope T and Do would think so. Right, but see, when we were testing, we weren't saying we need money. We need $20 or $40 for gas and food. No, you would ask for your need, what your need was. The need was food, and you accepted whatever you were given. Sometimes we were given a voucher to go to a restaurant because they were in the habit of giving transients that when they came asking for food. And sometimes they would send us to the basement of the church, would have canned goods. And they would say, here, you can take whatever you want here. That was rare that they would do that. But I ate food in churches many times when the churches were left open, and I was hitchhiking with my partner, and we would, be ready to stop, and we'd go to a church looking for something to eat and, some food, because we didn't need gas at that time except for our vehicles. And we'd go in the door was open, so we'd go in the church, we'd go down into the pantry, and if there were canned things there, we'd open them up and eat them. And then we put our sleeping bags down somewhere and sleep. And sometimes we were woken up by members of that parish, and we begin a conversation. And sometimes, as a result of that conversation, we'd be asked to leave and escorted to the door and told that we were working for the devil. That didn't happen that often. And sometimes we were picked up hitchhiking by somebody, and they would take us to their house and feed us with their family. A preacher sometimes would do that. And we'd sit there with their family and eat and talk. And when we did that, we were always respectful of them. But the more questions they asked, the more, they didn't have to ask a lot. If they wanted to know more, like a lot of times I would say, when I first approach a preacher in a church, I'd say, we're doing a task for our Heavenly Father, and we have some new information that we're passing on, we're passing along to people. And that's all we'd say sometimes. And so we gave them a clue that we had something new to say. So if they were at all curious, they'd say, and sometimes they did, they said, well, what is the new information? And we'd say that we'd say whatever came to our mind. We didn't plan ahead what to say in that case. And Jesus said, when you go ahead, don't think about what you're going to say. Let your Heavenly Father give you the words. And it's the same now. Let T and Do give you the words. But I think it's the way of the next level to be considerate of the person so that you don't overload them either. Let's say they just ask, what's the new information? And you say something that's a little bit new terminology for the new information. And they're satisfied with that. Then leave it at that. But if they ask for more, say, well, or if they say, well, that's not possible, and that couldn't mean that, then you can give them more. Because if they say that couldn't mean that, they're actually potentially not understanding. If they're not understanding, they potentially want to understand. If they want to understand, then the only way they're going to understand is by talking to their Heavenly Father about it. But the most immediate way that they might not recognize if they're not asking their Heavenly Father to help them understand it will be through the individuals that are bringing them this new information. And sometimes they will say thank you, and sometimes they will say, wow, I've thought about that way. You know, and they're going to say, that makes sense to me. And then there's, you know, thank you. And, you know, sometimes we get into conversations that would last for a long time, and I could care less whether they gave us something to eat or not, because I felt full from talking. Because when you're giving away next level information to somebody else, you're actually making space in your soul for more. Because you can't give it away without drawing it from the next level at the same time. And now Tiendo taught that. They said that they couldn't bring us a new step until we took and put into motion the step that they had already given us. And sometimes they would come to us and say, you're not thirsty enough, we're getting nothing new. You're not thirsty enough, so pull. And sometimes they would give us words to say to help us recognize how to pull. And one of them was to say this out loud. So in a sense, they did give us this one little prayer to say out loud. For a short period of time they did it, and we only said it out loud enough so that our partner could hear it. That was the instruction. And it was to say something like this. Like Tiendo. This is when we were in Tiendo's classroom, even though they weren't in the same location as us necessarily. They were in a tent, actually, when we were in tents in Biloxi, Mississippi, near Biloxi, Mississippi, actually, when we were briefly in Biloxi, Mississippi. That's when they gave us this. And I was partnered with Destody at the time. And I said to him, we said, we were supposed to say something like this. They didn't say we had to use these exact words. But they said, say something like, Tiendo, isn't there some way I can grow faster? Isn't there some way I can learn my lessons better? If I can take the next step? Those kind of thoughts. But you need to say it like you meant it. Not like, and if you got to a point to where you were saying it like the way they say the Our Father and the Hail Marys, or like the kids are taught to say that over and over again, you know, and that's going to be like, you know, because they lied to somebody, their parents, they say two Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys, and now they're forgiven. Well, yeah, the next level forgives them, of course, but, you know, saying those words kind of means nothing to a kid, necessarily. I guess it's not a terrible thing, but it is a terrible thing, because Jesus said not to use vain repetitions. Not to make vain had to do with making no value of it, taking it for granted. Vanity also had to do with the appearance of. So it's having the appearance of being holy by saying this prayer out loud. Or saying this prayer 3 times, you know, so that you feel like you're holy. You're made whole now. Which the prayer doesn't make you whole. The confession of it is a good thing. If it's something that Jesus gave us to abide by. If it's something that Jesus didn't give us to abide by, then, like if you didn't go to church, you skipped church, you know, and you went down to the pool hall and shot pool like I did sometimes, then that wasn't a sin. Even though the church would consider it a sin, maybe. I don't know if they would all. Maybe some of them wouldn't consider it a sin. But, I mean, telling a lie isn't even a sin. But being a false witness is a sin. So if you're lying about what somebody else did that gets somebody else in trouble, that's a very grave sin, because that's deceitful and it's going to affect someone else's life. So that's a very that's why shooting was one of those first 10 commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. I don't know which one it was, number 4, maybe, I don't know, 5. So it doesn't matter, the order. Well, the order, I think, did have some importance. I don't think the next level would have given it in that order if it didn't have some order of importance. But I could be wrong about that. Except Jesus showed that the first commandment was you should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, all your strength. And the first commandment that Moses gave was, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no false gods before me. So if you have a false god before you, that means you're not giving your all to the Lord, to the real Lord, the true Lord. Anyway, I don't know, I've taken so much time talking about everything else, but I think that's what I don't think of it as a negative. But the only thing I wanted to mention on the Pistis Sophia, I'll continue to read that. Well, I don't need to read it. I can just say that it makes mention of the Nag Hammadi collection. And Doe did provide us, maybe T was in her vehicle at the time, I don't remember exactly, whether they provided the Nag Hammadi after T was out of her vehicle. I think it was after that, because he also provided the lost books of the Bible, and also the Dead Sea Scrolls for us to study. And the Nag Hammadi was part of that. I think it was published maybe as the lost books. I may be mistaken about that. But some of that is also considered to be in the pseudepigrapha. I'm not sure I'm saying that right. But not all of it, which the Catholics maintain. But the Nag Hammadi collection, some of it was outlawed by the Catholic Church. So you can see that, there's probably something of value in it, or they wouldn't have outlawed it. Pista actually means faith, and Sophia means wisdom, so faith and wisdom. Terms used in the text. And it's identifying the female divine being with a name related to the moon, having many aspects and names. So it was interesting that that the moon was mentioned here, and the 12 male disciples were mentioned here in the Pista. And that's what brought me to this Pistis Sophia in the first place, because of the moon being mentioned in Revelation 12:1. And then as the woman, and but as a woman, but as the woman that's got the womb for the students. That's the relationship there, which is the lesser light, which would be Doe, which I talked about when I did Revelation 12:1. I thought that the sun was representing T as the father, and the sun was represented by the moon as the sun, which is the mother in the astrological definition. And the fact that was astronomical and astrological, and the fact that T was an astrologer, puts Christians to the test to hear that, because they were taught that astrology was of the devil, and but Jesus never said that, so I don't know where they got that from. I think I got it from Paul, actually, somewhere. Although it can be, if if we're using it to get human things, if we're if we want to find a new spouse, and so then it's not of the devil so much as just being of the human kingdom, because everything in the human kingdom is of the devil, in the sense that if you don't outgrow it, you don't ever get to the next level. So everything in the human kingdom becomes of the devil eventually. Tiendo did say that there were discarnates that even helped us walk and talk and all that, and we wouldn't be getting rid of those discarnates. They're not strong discarnates anyway, so they don't really hamper our growth. They're just but the discarnates that have us going against the things that we're taught by Jesus, for instance, and Tiendo, those are the serious discarnates that we need to conquer if we want to graduate. Not saying that we need to conquer them in the vehicles we have now. I hesitate to say that a little bit, because it would be good to think that we did need to conquer those, because then we would be growing at our fastest pace. But if we just feel like, that's too much to conquer right now, and if that becomes a reason to not try to conquer other things, then I think it's a disservice. It's a way that the Luciferians can kind of discourage us, thinking that it's all or nothing. It does become all or nothing. But when we're young, the next level knows that we're going to have problems and we're going to have difficulties. They make the bar higher for us so that our goals are going to really, so that the one that wants to grow the fastest has a goal that's going to be, as much as they can do. Because even if you can maintain the behavior and the ways of the classroom entirely, the next level can send you influences that can put you to the test in ways that you don't know you were put to the test, that you don't know that those 38 were put to the test. Because it just says, maintain your celibacy, in thought and deed. So, you might be thinking you're doing great with that, and you are, if you're doing that. But that doesn't mean that you've conquered that influence entirely. Because you'll continue, and if you continue to do it until you leave the vehicle, then you've done the best you can do. And if the next level wants to give you a harder test when you come back for your next lesson opportunity, then they will give you a harder test. And the amount of energy and mind that you had before that will not be good enough, because they want you to draw more, to have more strength to work against that influence. That's the way it works, I believe. That Tiendo taught. I think that you can see, as you'll be able to see if you study everything they said and did. So I do feel absolute about that. Not that I expressed it the best. I think I could always express it better. So now regarding the Daniel, might as well finish that since I said something about it. Well, you know what? I'm just going to skip that, and I'm put it on the screen here, so that if you want to read what I said about Daniel here, that's fine. I don't need to go through all the Daniel scriptures. I want to get back to the next verse in Revelations 12. I left off with 12:9, I believe, saying that the great dragon, which they seem to be referring to, you know, when it says something twice, take special note of it, because the next level is giving this information, and they choose their words very well. There's no reason to believe that this was misconstrued, because it was all so symbolic that they didn't need to, you know, there was not so much they really could say about it, except what they could imagine about what it says, you know. So anyway, that's my take on it anyway. But in some circumstances, I could see that saying it twice, you know, maybe doesn't apply. What I'm saying, but like they said that Babylon has fallen. They said it twice. I think it was because there was two falls, which at this point I think was the 9/11 event that led to the war, endless war of the Red Horse in Revelation 6, and the financial crisis that led to the financial collapse that was also a fall, because they were both, I believe, deceitful. And both in order to make money, so that they could put it into their black budget programs without being detected and having to go through all the rigmarole of Congress and all that, and then explaining it to the press and all that. So I think at this point I still think that those are the two falls, and they relate to and the black horse. Obama indicates that in Revelation 6 as well, having to do with Wall Street and all that, with commodities of the wheat and the barley and the cost of those commodities, showing you that it had to do with buying and selling, and it was a financial fall. Anyway, so that's all I want to say about that. So Revelation 12:10. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now is come salvation and strength and kingdom of our God, and power is Christ. For accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." Okay, again, they're talking about he was thrown down, he was cast down. It's like a third time. So, but as I said before, refers to the old serpent, so it's referring to the past here, saying this individual is the same individual that was the Adam and Eve serpent, the snake, and that actually, if you go back to the Hebrew and you look at what it says that he's a hisser, and he's subtle. And as you go into sly, cunning, it's a very subtle voice. And his history, he's like saying it secretly, quietly, telling you this, go eat that fruit, even though it wasn't on the menu, it wasn't given to you by your older members. Go, because then you'll find out, what he's hiding from you. Anyway, so that's the way the Luciferians come to us. Subtly and secret. They slip in until we even lose perspective of our relationship with our older member. If we keep on going down that road that we're influenced by. But the next level will help us. If we've expressed that to the next level, that we want their help to grow faster, to grow to become members of their kingdom, then they're not going to let us fall by, one little whispering by the serpent, one little temptation fall. Though we should not take it for granted that they will pick us up. Assuming it would be a mistake, like a lot of Christians do. They assume that they're going to be forgiven. But they are forgiven, but then when it comes time for the truth to be revealed to them, they've lost so much of the mind that they could have had by adhering to all those lessons that they don't recognize the truth when it's right in front of their eyes. And that's how you subtly lose the connection. Notice that the whole world is deceived. And that's because it becomes an exercise machine, a catalyst is what Doe called it in UFO, as he said in the USA Today information advertisement. He says Lucifer was a catalyst, and the fallen angels were catalysts for our growth, and that's why they were provided to Adam and Eve, because they wanted Adam and Eve to be examples of what it would take to override that influence. And if they didn't fail that time, then they would have been given a harder test. The object was to put them to the test so that they would succumb to the same influence that ended up falling himself. What I don't know is whether there was another Lucifer that fell, which there might have been, that influenced the Luciferians. Maybe there was. There was some indication of that, or something I read recently. I don't know. I can't pull it in right now, so don't ever talked about it, so that I'm aware of. So I will try to pull that in or find it, really. But if it comes up, I'll mention it in a future broadcast. Call the devil and Satan. Okay. Well, Satan means adversary, if you follow it out. What the heck's going on? I don't know why that link's not working. How weird is that? I never saw that happen before with the software. It's got a glitch, I guess. Or it's being thrown off by this character here. I thought I looked at it before, though. It's actually right up here, the one I'm talking about. Anyway, so you can see where it says Satan, 7850, is enemy, arch enemy of good, adversary, is the primary definition. Okay, and Tiendo talked about how each class member was assigned an adversary, to be their adversary, and we called them boogers. That was the name they gave for them. So they're cast out. It's the third time they're saying that they're cast out. So they're, but we're going to see later that they're not out of the picture. They're still in the picture. But they just don't have the option to get back with the program, however remote that option was. And so the next verse is that I just read. And now just means this day, this hour, henceforth, here present, that is coming salvation, which is, salvation is talking about that dough is coming with the power of Christ. Dough and the kingdom of God, in other words, the entire kingdom of his older member, the Evolutionary Level Above Human, and power is Christ. Oh yes, they're saying the kingdom of God, so in other words the Father, the kingdom of T, and power of his Christ. In other words, the Christ was the one that was Jesus, who performed the Christ task. And it's also Doe at this point too, because at this point Doe had also overcome the world by being born to the throne, which is said happened already. And so the accuser is the Luciferian space aliens and their fallen angels. Is the plaintiff. He's charging them with the offense. Putting doubts in their heads, blah, blah, blah. Making them think that there's something in the world that they want. Something they want to do in the world. Which Tiendo gave us many opportunities to go back to. They even required us to think about at certain times, for short periods of time, minutes, for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, they said, be by yourself and think about if there's something you want in the world. And then they said, after that 20, 30 minutes was over, they said, okay, now forget about it. Go back to not thinking about the world at all. Not thinking about the past at all. Because that was one of our lessons. To not think about the past, not entertain anything about the past. We were forgiven for the things that we did wrong. That's where grace comes in. And Jesus' disciples were given the same thing. That's where the whole idea of grace comes from. But that doesn't mean that everything you do from that moment on is part of that grace, unless you repent each time. So repent means change your mind, change your thinking, change from the misinformation mind to the next level mind. And so when we fall from that goal in whatever ways that relates, then we're losing some of that next level mind. And to get it back, we have to change our mind again. To get rid of that misinformation mind, get it out of our soul pocket, or out of our human container, Because the object is to empty our human container that holds the mind, the misinformation mind, and fill our next level container, the soul body that was given to us, though described. So now it says in Revelation 12:11. Did I skip one? No. And they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb. Okay, now it seems like they're talking about the individual. See, this is talking about the brethren, for the accuser of our brethren. Now, this is John who's writing this, okay? So he's talking about his brethren. So in other words, the disciples are mentioned right here. Those are the disciples of Jesus, however many there were. Not just the 12, it's everybody. 70, maybe more than that. Maybe less. But, so they're right here. Now it's saying that they overcame, some of them. I'm not saying, I don't know that they all overcame, but maybe they all overcame to their own capacity. They didn't overcome completely, or they wouldn't have had to come back. And those said that they had to come back to be, like Jesus even said, you have to be born of flesh again in order to be born of soul. So if they had overcome completely, then they would have already been born of soul. Which perhaps some were born to. Maybe this is referring to being born into infant vehicles in the next level. The kind of vehicle that perhaps Lucifer had and perhaps Adam had, that could still reverse metamorphosis into a human condition, like the Luciferians did, apparently, by cohabitating and propagating with humans that hadn't been given deposits. The daughters of men. So, but it's the same word for overcoming, and that, but in this case they're overcoming by the blood of the Lamb. So that's talking about Jesus again. So it's not talking about the students of Tiendo in the vehicles that they came back. It's talking about those students, but not talking about them in their new vehicles. And by the word of their testimony, they overcame because they gave testimony to Jesus. And they didn't love their lives till death. So they died giving their testimony. And that's what gave them the crown. And that's the crown that they threw down. And that crown, I believe, is the new grown human being, the infant physical vehicle they would have each been assigned, and their souls were moved into to do tasks in the next level in preparation for coming here. And those are the vehicles that they discarded when they lay down their lives again in some of the crashes at Roswell and Laredo, and I think, and the only ones I know that Tiendo believed, I think, were authentic were Roswell and Aztec. But they didn't say that those were the only two. They didn't actually say that they didn't, I don't know if they ever said which of those, but Doe brought us the book, Crash at Aztec, in 1987 or 88. And that book talked about, I think, 18 bodies found. And Roswell talks about like there were 4 bodies, but then there was another crash associated with Roswell that had some bodies, and there was a crash in Laredo, and there was a crash in Paradise Valley, Arizona. And we lived in Paradise Valley, Arizona. We never lived in El Laredo. But anyway, but Doe did say that the Luciferians did some facsimile crashes. So I don't have to really know the exact numbers. But this seems to be talking about that these individuals that are the brethren are the ones that overcame, to that degree at least. To where at this time now they were ready to actually graduate to adult next level vehicles. Therefore rejoice, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth, and sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, knoweth that he hath but a short time. Well, the reason I wanted to get to this point, at least, was because I wanted to go back to where it says that they know that they have a short time, to go over here to USA Today, where it says, they know that rumor has it that their days are numbered. Okay? So that's where something that's in the prophecy Doe talked about. And I don't know if he's saying that because he read that here or not. But he certainly didn't tell us that. And there's no evidence that they did it in reverse. As the evidence is in reverse from T and from Doe, that they didn't come to know what they knew by reading Jesus' life. T said that. And that they knew that they were from the kingdom of God before they read about the 2 witnesses being that prophecy. That learning about that prophecy just told them what prophecy they were supposed to fulfill. That's all they got from that. Not that they were those individuals. They knew they were the individuals. Anyway, I'm gonna close at this point because I think I've been going for 2.5 hours. So I'm gonna say good night.